Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Authentic Info Podcast. I'm your host, Admar Sandechak. Now, in the previous week or two, Pitch Black Afro was released from prison. You'll remember Pitch Black Afro, I think in 2019, he was arrested for killing his wife. And he pleaded the case to say he carried no intention to do that. He just pushed there. So the case was culpable homicide and was sentenced for 10 years. And he recently enjoyed the program of Remission, which was also afforded to people like President Zuma. And it's not the only person who benefited from that program. There are other hundreds and hundreds of inmates who benefited from that program. But it made the news because he was only in prisons. It only served, I think it's 3 years, 1922. Yeah, I think he only served 3 years and was released and was supposed to serve 10 years. So people need to understand. I see a lot of people are questioning our justice system to say it's not fair. People need to understand that in South Africa, prisons do not punish anymore, but they rehabilitate. They try and correct a person to be better or to be a better contributor in society. I understand that this doesn't sit well with the family of victims, the family of people who were victimized by these, for example, criminals. It doesn't sit well because they expect justice to be some sort of punishment. But the government thought it otherwise and introduced Correctional Services Act, which seeks to correct wrong behavior, which seeks to educate a person through rehabilitation programs to be a better contributor on the society or on their society. So this remission program, people need to understand that there are authoritative or powers that are vested, or an authority that is vested on the president can be able to release inmates through different programs, remission being one of them, presidential pardon being one of them, and things like that. These things are provided for by the Correctional Services Act 111 of 1998. So Pitch Black Afro was a popular artist. He worked very close with DJ Cleo, Zeke Zeke, and all other popular Kwaito artists back then. And it was unfortunate that Kwaito dropped and new genres started to flourish. They were introduced and then they stole the dance floor. So I think these are the people who were, very disappointed and depressed. That is why I think even the finances were not right. So that is why he ended up finding himself fighting physically with his wife, and it led to him, to be arrested, to commit a crime that led to him to be in prison. And he also served, I think, some few years in trial. He also served some few years in trial. And when a person is sentenced, they also consider that. How long have we been in trial and things like that? Because the conditions of a trial prison are not that different from those of a sentenced prison. I think they are more similar because there a person is housed by the Department of Correctional Services and everything is determined by their act and the way the head of that particular prison want things to operate. So it is prison in itself. Trial, it's like prison, unless if a person got bail. But if the person didn't get bail, trial is like prison, because anything that happens on the other side of sentenced offenders can happen even on unsentenced offenders. So people were very harsh on the state, saying that justice is not served and justice is not seen to be being served by these institutions, for example, and especially Department of Correctional Services. So they accused the justice system of South Africa of being weak. And I don't think it's weak. I think it's fair. I understand that there are people who were arrested, found guilty, sentenced, served their term, got parole, went back home or reintegrated, and they commit more crimes. I understand it happens. But there are also those who understand that they've done wrong. They go back to the community to try and do the right things. There are those people who are working hard to even encourage other ex-offenders to be better contributors in their societies. We see people like Scheme GP Foundation, who has multiple programs and events to try and talk to these gents and ladies who were once served in prison, to try and convince them to do the right things, because he knows that there's a problem of reoffending in South Africa. So even the department has some programs, because even though we have programs, it depends on who is implementing these programs. And the most important thing, it depends on the willingness of the person who's supposed to benefit from these programs. There are inmates who, even in other podcasts, you can tell them, you can hear them saying that they don't think these programs work. But I don't think they don't work. They do work. It's just that the person who was presenting the program to that inmate failed to win that inmate. They failed to win the soul of that inmate, or to convince that inmate to understand that they can go back to the community and make it. And there's also another problem of fingerprints, criminal records, and things like that. So these things affect a lot of ex-offenders, because when they are reintegrated back into their society, they need to carry on from where they've left. They find that their peers have moved on with life. They find that their children are now old and vulnerable. They find that maybe their parents are dead. They find that there's no development at home. And this person must work. This person must try and bring about change. And when they try and apply for jobs, criminal record put some red tapes. So I think this is something that government should look into, because there is school in prison, and inmates can come out of prison being professionals, but it becomes difficult for companies and even government itself that provides this education to inmates, cannot hire these inmates. Big companies cannot hire someone with a criminal record. And even clients, even when these people comes out with skills to try and start small businesses, they don't get customers and clients, because no one want to associate themselves with an ex-convict. So a person like Pitch Black Afro, who was known to be one of the best artists in the Kwaito and hip hop era of South Africa, when he comes out of prison, people expect him to pick up from where he left. Although by the time he committed that crime, his career was down. But he needs to adjust, he needs to adapt, and he needs to contribute, in his family. He needs to have a dialogue with the family of the victim, the family of his wife. He needs them to accept that he is out, and he needs to ask for an apology. He needs to apologize. He need to apologize to that family so that he is fully accepted in the community, so that he can also look at what he has done, and he can also try and avoid such instances. So the reason I covered this is because on Twitter, a lot of people were saying the justice system of South Africa is weak. And that is not the case. President Mbeki was teaching about the militarization of the police, saying that they have not done enough to demilitarize the police. And also, the Department of Correctional Services has been demilitarized. The prison system, it's no longer part of correctional services. Now, they use the Correctional Services Act that provides for these programs that seeks to change the mind and the behavior of a convicted offender, to make this person a better contributor into the society. And I believe that if a person like Pitch Black Afro benefits from a program such as Remission, it is not the president who went to that prison where Pitch Black Afro was serving, who went there to pick him. Prison itself give programs to inmates and they make recommendations. So it happens that the name of Pitch Black Afro was recommended for that benefit of remission, and he benefited from that. So people need to understand that the way the law works, it has a little to do with emotions. We need to understand the facts. We need to understand the provisions of these acts before we try and apply our minds. Because when we go with emotions, we're going to ruin everything. So Pitch Black Afro is out. He killed his wife mistakenly. And the court considered that. That is why they didn't convict him as a murderer, but someone who committed a culpable homicide. And it depends on his behavior in prison. It depends on the programs that was set for him to follow through the so-called correctional sentence plan. If he had followed that, if he had successfully attended to his programs, I believe that if he was willing to change, he's going to contribute positively in the society after his reintegration back into society. So people need to accept that he is back. People need to understand that he made a mistake. Culpable homicide is something that is a crime that anyone can commit anytime. You can reverse your car only to find out that there's a child who crawled under your car. You can be driving at a normal speed in town and someone throw themselves in front of your car. You can be cutting a tree after checking everything that there's no child, and some child come with a bicycle and then the branch falls on it. So anything can happen. So the crime of culpable homicide needs us to remove emotions on it and make sure that we understand that people are given second chances in life, and to understand that anyone can land in prison anytime. We also need to understand that anyone can land in prison anytime. People are falsely accused of rape and they're arrested and convicted by people who falsely accuse them. And after serving, maybe after of their sentence, they come forward to say they lied. So anyone can land in prison. We shouldn't judge people who were sentenced. We shouldn't judge people who committed crime, because the motives behind all these wrongdoings differ. And anyone can be found in a situation where they are left with no other option but, for example, to defend themselves, which leads to them committing the crime of culpable homicide or killing someone without intention of such. So this is Authentic Info Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell. Let's grow together. Thank you.